exclusively on Secular Media Network. This is the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Hello and welcome to the Gaytheist Manifesto, your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. I am your host, Callie Wright, and I am joined today by my co-host, Ari Coleman.
Yeah. That was the audience, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, no, your intros are always the best. You just keep doing your thing. You're just fine.
I'm trying.
So today we're going to have a discussion about coming out, transitioning, being atheist, being LGBT, being queer or trans in the workplace. We've got a couple of people joining us where we're going to share stories. We're going to give advice. We're going to talk about, we're going to hear some listener stories, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how we can be better allies to folks who are coming out, folks who are transitioning in the workplace. So I want to introduce our guests. First, we have Jen. Jen, welcome.
Hey, nice to be here.
And Stevie. Stevie, welcome.
Hey, what's up?
So nice. So, what I'd like the four of us to do real quick is kind of go through, let's introduce ourselves, let's give our pronouns, and then give a little bit of what we do and, kind of what our experience has been. Jen, do you want to start?
Sure. Long-time listener, first-time caller. My name is Jen Henderson. I'm the director of technology at my company. I started transition about 2 years ago, and I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary at my company of transition. I work in the thank you very much. I work in the marketing industry, digital marketing industry, and am considered to be an executive. So that's been an interesting portion of this story.
Very cool. And your pronouns?
She, her, please.
All right. And Stevie, what about you?
Hi, I'm Stevie. Right now I use they, them pronouns, and I can also use he, him. I have been at my work for about 3 years. I work at a dog daycare place. We do a lot with like training and just dog camp stuff. It's a pretty low paid job, but it's a very good job to have. And I've been out there for about a year now. So that's really cool.
Very cool. Very cool. And Ari, we know your name, and we should know your pronouns by now, but
my pronouns are they, them, theirs, if you haven't listened in before. Currently, I work at an optical lab. We make lenses for eyeglasses, custom lenses. And but that's I do customer service and some tech support type things. It's a temporary gig for me at the moment while my partner is in graduate school. And then after he gets out, I'm hoping to go on to graduate school as well and get a PhD in developmental psychology. So hopefully after that, I will be a professor / research psychologist.
Hell yeah. All right. Yeah. And I, of course, am Callie. That's my show. So hopefully people know that. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I don't know if I've talked a whole lot about my newer job on the show. I know I've kind of gushed about it, but I don't know if I've said specifically what I do. So I work in a call center. I do tech support for a cable company, and so people yell at me when their digital phone stops working, or their internet stops working, or their cable stops working, which is really fun. I didn't transition on the job. Actually, this job that I have was where I was able to finally be Callie 100% of the time, and I actually was. I wasn't fired from my last job for being trans, but I was forced to quit, which that we'll probably get more into detail on that story later. So Jen, you said you're coming up on your year anniversary. Can you tell me a little bit about what? So in this corporate, executive type world, like what was that experience like for you?
Well, it was really, it was sort of eye-opening for me because I started with this company. I'm coming up on my 2-year anniversary of working for this company. So I started transition physically just a few months before starting with this company. And it's a very, I would say, progressive company. We work with a lot of millennials. And I had done quite a bit of research with HRC's index, trying to find a company that would be I would be comfortable transitioning in. I have 3 children. I have a well-established life. And so I have to admit, I was looking for a lot of safety in my transition, and I was trying to find a company that would allow me to do that. So what I did find, this company was really great. Their policies were very much about inclusion, about, we do advertising. We won't even do ads that are homophobic or transphobic. We will refuse that work if we see that. And they had a really great policies around that when I was being brought on board. The issue was, when I finally came out to our HR group, I said, "So where's your transition policies? Where's the paperwork that shows how to do that at this company?" Because we're owned by a very large company, and that company has 140,000 employees. I thought I can't be the very first one. And we looked around and looked around and looked around, and that paperwork just didn't exist. And so me and my local HR person started working on it. And we ended up with about a 15-page document that describes how somebody at our company would go through transition. And it describes, it's the same stuff we've done a lot, Callie, 101 type of training, just in a very short, small little area. And then talking specifically to managers about how to handle it with people, facilities, because we have gym facilities and we have, the regular restroom facilities and that kind of stuff. But it was a pretty comprehensive piece of material. I was particularly fearful about coming out to my direct supervisor. He's a gentleman who's proud because he came from a farm background, salt of the earth kind of guy, loves football and all that kind of stuff. And I was concerned about that. And what happened was, which was disconcerting at the time, was we were doing a one-on-one, and it was before I let him know. And I found out that through a third party that someone had told him. Someone had outed me at work ahead of time. Oh. And so I was very concerned, and I finally went into the room, did a one-on-one with him, and I said, I know that you know that I know that you know. So what do we do about this? And I was very happy because his attitude was, essentially, I have no clue what this is. I have no idea what it means to be transgender. I definitely don't know what transition is, but I'm here to support you. And it was amazing. So part of our culture has been, especially this year, has been around family. Because when you're at work, we work long hours. You're with your biological family, if you're lucky, 4 or 6 hours a day during the week. You're with these guys 8 to 10 hours a day. And so we consider everybody to be family. And so he considered this to be an obligation of a family, our corporate family, to make sure that this went well.
Wow.
And so I was very proud of him. And so then a couple of months later, after all the paperwork had gotten finished and I was ready to go, they allowed me to stand in front of the entire company, all 200 local employees, and introduce myself for the first time. And it was an amazing experience. Got a lot of hugs, got a lot of congratulations, and it was really kind of weird because most people take off like a couple of weeks, between announcing to the company and coming back and reintroducing yourself as your proper name and looking different. Well, the next day happened to be my birthday, and we were doing an offsite for one of our teams. It was a celebration, going down to Keeneland, if anybody knows what that is, horse racing. And they said, "We don't want to do this without you. We know you're going to take this off because it was your birthday, but we'd really like you to come as Jen." And so my introduction was literally 18 hours later, hopping on a bus and going down to Keeneland and betting on some horses and having the most amazing birthday of my life.
Wow. Like that had to be a combination of like super exciting and absolutely terrifying, like all at once.
It was, but it was great. Everybody's been wonderful. And I got to tell you, I deal a lot here in the Cincinnati area with several charities. I do some speaking, and I am in a very, very unusual situation. At the end of the day, my trans status, and I'm 6'5". Okay, so I'm passable if at a distance. Let's put it that way. And it has not been an issue. I'm in front of clients, big clients locally and internationally. I travel. I'm part of the team. I've got a group of 20 to 30 people, depending on the time of the year, that answer to me directly. And it's not a thing. It's literally not a thing.
That's
and it
incredible.
Just breaks my heart to have the stories that I hear about people who are struggling every day with being trans. Good people, smart people who are having issues because of their trans status. So it's just that I feel like I've been blessed, and because of that, I need to pay it forward.
That's so cool. Stevie, you want to talk a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, so a little bit of background. My first job was actually at Kings Island. I was, I think, about 16.
For those who don't know, Kings Island is an amusement park here in the Cincinnati area.
Yeah, very big amusement park. At the time, I knew myself to be genderqueer, which is also what I still identify as now, and it was not the best working there. I kind of came out to a supervisor and said, I want my name changed to Stevie on my name tag, and they were just like, well, we can't really do that. There's like rules against that, blah, blah, blah. So that was kind of like my first try at ever coming out with anything corporate-wise. So I was just like, well, I'm going to give up there because it was a seasonal job, and so I just decided to not come back. But however, in the spring, I was hired as an associate for this dog daycare place, and at the time, I also wasn't out to my family, and I had no idea how these people were, so I just decided to go by my short, very ambiguous nickname, which was Stevie, and well, actually at the time it was something different. I believe it was a shorter nickname of my birth name, but it was about a year and a half after I had worked there where I had felt like I could come out, just because a lot of the conversations that were circulating throughout the workplace were very positive. Everybody was very liberal. There wasn't really anybody I felt super uncomfortable around, except for maybe some of like the cis guys that worked there. And I mean, it was a little bit intimidating there, but I knew my boss was a very understanding person. So the first fall I came out was about a year and a half ago now. A year and a half ago. And I decided to do it by email. And I mean, as much as they were still accepting, I was very afraid. I was only 18 still. And I was afraid of losing basically what I felt like I had already lost with kind of my family. And I have a very interesting, not very good family. So I really didn't want to lose the workplace support or lose my job and then have to find another job while also dealing with family issues. And I kind of came from a point where I thought everybody was going to react how my family reacts, which was very negatively. So it took me a while to come out to them, to the workplace, just because of that. But I had sent her an email. I actually got advice from one of my friends who was older and had more experience on what to write. And basically, I put in information that said, I understand that you seem very accepting of people, and I've heard a lot of conversations circulating that are very positive. So I've entrusted you with this information that I'm trans. And I told them what pronouns I use, which were they, them, theirs, and he, him, his. And I kind of gave them a little bit of background on surgery stuff, that I wasn't going to transition like surgically that immediately. And I told them that I understand that it might make them uncomfortable, but to always, talk to me about it, talk through that with me. And I gave them some basic information about trans people and kind of attached it there like as a little education thing. And so I really didn't know, kind of after that, I was like, well, I can just hope for the best. And I'm not a very confrontational person either, which is why an email was very important to me. So I included that. And then shortly after that, she had called a work meeting, which I was very nervous about because I'm like, is this about me? I really hope it's not about me.
Yeah, without consulting you, like, hey, we're just going to tell everyone your business without talking to you first. That's awesome. Let's do that.
Yeah, so I was so nervous, and I was like, oh my God, like, I hope she isn't doing this because of what I sent her, and she hadn't really responded to my email at all. So I was like about to cry. I was so nervous. And that was the first day back from a while because I was also in school at the time. And I got to the meeting and we had to introduce ourselves. And I guess this was just a work meeting about the coming busy season, which she doesn't do all the time, which kind of threw me off there. So I was right to not really expect that. But so we had to introduce ourselves, and I introduced myself as Stevie, and everybody was just kind of like, oh, okay, and like didn't really say anything about it. And after that, a situation kind of went through where she went through the meeting, and it ended up not being about me. She talked to me after and was like, look, like I got your email. I really want to be supportive of you, like as much as possible. I understand that things are hard enough as it is, and I want you to let me know if you want support coming out to people, or if you would like me to do this for you, or what you would like me to do. And so basically, like, it was all I could have asked for, because I'm usually a very nervous person. I have a lot of anxiety, so I really wasn't prepared to come out to my coworkers. And so I gave her permission to tell some of my other coworkers, which none of them had an issue with it, surprisingly enough, or not surprisingly, with me being trans. But she kind of told them, like, oh, Stevie goes by he, him pronouns, and they, them now. And they go by Stevie, and would like you to call them this. And if you do, that'd be great. And if you have questions, go to them, which I thought was just, wow, that's the most I've ever asked for.
Yeah, well, you gear up to correct it because so many people get it wrong all the time. So you're ready to just be like, okay, that was mostly good, but there's this one thing. And then you're like, well, no, that's actually that's all good.
I was just like, well, I mean, she still slips up on language just a little bit now, but I mean, none of it's bad intent. So I was really surprised by that. And I made it really easy for me just because I am really bad at confronting people directly. And I think she was aware of that. So that was like probably the best situation I could have had. But I think what was so important about work accepting me was because at the time I came out, I kind of realized it was a do or die moment where I was living with my parents, and I had already felt so negative, and I just needed some support. Like, I really needed that support from somebody else. And I figured, well, I can try this with the work, and if they support me, that's great. And I feel like I have allies outside of this family situation. And if they don't, then I guess I'll just look for another job or find some other options. So that was really a good thing. And since then, I mean, I really haven't had any issues. She's asked me a couple times. Well, a couple weeks later, she had asked me which bathroom I felt comfortable using, which was nice because we only have a men's and a women's bathroom, and we can't really install another one just because the building is old and
right.
bad infrastructure and everything like that with the planning. So I told her that I felt most comfortable at the time using the women's restroom, but after I had started medically transitioning, I would use the men's restroom, and she was completely fine with that. She just let me know to come to her if I have any needs at all. So that was really good.
That's so cool. And it's an interesting contrast too, because, you have, and I mean, even in, corporate environments where all the policies are right, that doesn't necessarily mean the policies are implemented in the right way, exactly. And we all know, like, if somebody wants to fire you, they're going to find a way to fire you. Like, even if it's for a reason that you're not supposed to get fired for, like if they have a very progressive, policy regarding trans stuff or being queer or whatever, a lot of times that stuff doesn't matter because someone will find a way. So it's really interesting to be in that environment where, maybe, it's a small business or whatever. And, people just, the trans thing never even crosses anyone's mind. So it's a very interesting contrast.
Yeah. And it was a small enough company that I really couldn't find any information from whatever HRC index or anything. And I really couldn't find a lot of corporate information either. And I figured, well, if I'm at least connecting with my coworkers on, gay rights and issues, that they could be at least understanding to this. And it was really a good thing. And it still is a good thing. It's a good transitional job because I'm actually in college right now pursuing a degree in the arts. And
very cool.
I found a lot of little outlet things I can do with my work experience, like dog training. I really like doing that, and the job is really nice because it doesn't involve working with people all the time. It's more that's a plus. It's also with a lot of animals, and I'm really good at reading animal behavior. So in a way, it was a perfect job to transition in, just because your customers don't really notice, because we do have front desk people, but I wasn't really a front desk person. I'm kind of like behind the scenes person.
Right.
So that was really cool. And like I said, it still is really nice because it's an interesting work environment. Like I wouldn't ever be the person to say, trust your boss, give all this information to your boss, blah, blah, blah. Just because that's how life is. But my boss is a very family-oriented person, and I guess she feels like all of our employers are like family, which is really cool. And it's also really interesting because a lot of people think that, trusting your boss, they're going to use that against you. And my boss is probably like one of the only bosses in the world who wouldn't do that. And like, She has nothing against me.
Very cool.
And, she knows, I think she's aware also that everybody gets paid a little bit more than minimum wage, so it's not really that, like, you can do anything that wise.
Right, she can't hold it over your head, like, you guys are getting paid a whole bunch of money, you need to get in line. Like, she kind of gets it, right?
Yeah, so she can, like, everybody's kind of with each other in the struggle,
right,
that wise. But,
cool. And Jen, you sound like you had something to say a minute ago.
Well, and that's the thing that's interesting, and it really is the difference between a small company and a large company. We do a lot of work with P&G, for instance, and I know they have very similar policies. And it was interesting because our HR person, who was amazing, absolutely amazing, she said, essentially, as soon as you told me, by the way, you're a protected class here. Meaning if somebody has an issue with you and it comes up to an HR thing, that HR and the policies that are in place have to look at that slightly closer to see if there is some sort of trans bias there. And we would do that with LGBT people. We would look at that with people who are minorities for race or whatever in our company as well. So there are protections that a lot of more, I'll say, enlightened companies have done. And so that's really, really great. The other part of that was interesting was with my HR person, they had a couple of people who came up to her after I transitioned and said, What do we do if somebody doesn't want to work with Jen, just is uncomfortable being in the same room with Jen for some reason? And her response was, well, then this isn't the company for them to work at because we support Jen 100%.
Yes.
So, there are good companies out there. There are very supportive companies out there. There's lots of other reasons to get canned and fired in businesses besides,
right.
What you look like and or sound like or present yourself. And, it is interesting because I did have to negotiate a little bit. I mean, I make it sound really great, but I did negotiate a little bit because, I was the first person. There was some discomfort. We mentioned the bathroom issue, for instance. So we have 3 floors. One of them's not used that much. The other 2 are used quite a bit. My boss was concerned that, we have more than half of our staff is female and they might be uncomfortable using the restroom with me. So I said, here's the deal. I'm not going to make a policy for somebody in the future because that's what we're talking about right here. I will do a compromise. For the first 2 weeks, I will go down to the 7th floor. I'm on the 9th. I'll go down to the 7th floor. I'll use that restroom there, the women's restroom there, because it's hardly ever used. And then after that, after people are used to me, then I'm going to use whatever restroom I want because that's our policy. And so what was funny about it was that about a week later, after I started transitioning, everybody's like, why the hell do you keep walking down to 7? So like I said, it really does depend on the company you're working with. And I'm, like I said, very blessed that I work with a lot of younger people than myself who this is just perfectly normal. And in fact, they find this to be a positive about the company that we support everybody for who they are and find that as a positive.
That's awesome. Ari, do you want to talk about your experience?
Yeah, I've had a really unusual experience in several different ways with coming out at work. Number one being that I started this job because I moved from out of state. So when I was starting my job, I could pretty much start with a clean slate with whatever name I wanted to use. So that was really, I didn't have to go through the whole can you change all my documents and start calling me this other name because that's just the name that I used. Of course, I did on my forms, I had to put my legal name, but I was just like, oh, Ari is just the name that I go by, and no one really questioned it. So that and the other, I have to tell this story. This is amazing. My boss is awesome. He's the best. And so this is the story of how my boss kind of goaded me into coming out to him. So, obviously, I had to put my legal name and stuff on my forms. And he was the only one who saw any of those forms. So he was the only one who knew that Ari wasn't my legal name when I started. Everyone was just like, oh, you tell me your name's Ari, so your name's Ari. I'm not going to think that you have a different name. So I didn't really know how to go about or if I should come out, even though in Illinois, being transgender is a protected class. So they couldn't legally, fire me or do anything like that. But of course, as Callie was saying earlier, they can, if they really want to, they can find ways to kind of make life difficult for you or push you out of the job. So I also was just like, I don't know, this is kind of a really hard conversation to have. And I'm just starting this job and I'm nervous. I don't really want to do this. So I decided to put it off for a while until I started testosterone. So a few weeks into the job, I was sitting at my desk and my boss goes out of nowhere, so why did you decide to start going by a different name? And I kind of froze up. I was like, I don't really know if I want to get into this conversation right now. So I was just like, oh, I don't know. I just feel like it fits me better than my other name. And he was like, how did you decide to change your name to Ari? And I was like, I don't know. I just thought of it. I just thought it sounded like a cool name. And he kind of got the vibe that I wasn't really having this conversation. So he just backed off after that. And I didn't realize until later that because we have little desk cubicles and I couldn't actually see anything except the top of his head at the time, that we were the only 2 people in the room. And if I had known that, I would have just told him. But I was kind of, because I know that he's a liberal person and he's an atheist and all this stuff. So I knew that it wasn't going to be a problem with him, but I was kind of just worried about in front of my other coworkers who also are in that same room with me. So I think it was probably the next week after that, he comes back in from lunch and he's talking on the phone with his wife, who is a therapist. And he started talking to her very loudly about his wife was calling to complain about like this billing person that she works with, and she has a trans client, and the billing person was refusing to use the client's preferred name in emails, even though the only way that she would really need to was for insurance purposes. But even in like emails about this client, still using the wrong name. And so the wife is basically venting to him, and he was like, "Oh, that is terrible. I can't believe that's happening," like being really loud about it.
Nice.
And I was sitting there like, is it possible that he is trying to tell me something, that he is okay with this? And I was like, no, you are being so paranoid. That is just your anxiety talking. There's no way. He's just talking with his wife. And then he hung up and he was like, "Oh, this is a situation that my wife is in. Can you believe this?" And we were like, "Yeah, that's really shitty." And everyone in the office was like, "Yeah, that's really shitty." So you can see where this is going.
Dropping subtle hints here and there.
Yeah, exactly. So probably, I don't know, a week or two after that, I was at his house visiting, and we had a few drinks, and we were continuing a conversation that we had started in the office, which was an argument about the meaning of the word queer, because he uses it in a way that I do not think is correct. Not in a harmful way, just in a like everyone is queer kind of way, which I don't agree with. And we were sitting there, me and him and his wife, just having this whole conversation. And I was a little tipsy, probably more than tipsy. And out of nowhere, I was just like, "Okay, I'm going to do this." And I just said, "By the way, I'm trans." And he said, "Well, I kind of assumed you were." I was like, "What? What is happening?" And I was like, "But so that means when you were asking me about my name, and then when you were talking with your wife on the phone, that you were trying to tell me that you were okay with it?" And he was like, "Yeah, exactly." And I was like, "Mind blown. This does not happen. Usually you have to like fight to keep everything like a secret and all this stuff, and that people don't want to know any of your business." And then the complete opposite is happening, where he was trying to get me to open up to him. So that just took a huge weight off my shoulders. So after that, for most of the time that I've worked there, he's the only one who really knows, except for one of my coworkers who I ended up seeing at a queer event here, and we just ended up talking and stuff. So she also knows that I'm trans. So I wasn't really sure how to go about it with my other coworkers, because I knew when I started testosterone that my voice was going to be changing and things were going to happen. I wasn't really going to be able to hide it. And I have put that off for pretty much as long as humanly possible. I don't know why, because I know my boss is not going to tolerate any kind of harmful language towards me or behavior. And I know that they wouldn't anyway. It's just like, I just don't want to have an awkward conversation. So he's asked me a few times, my boss, like, "Do you want me to talk to these other coworkers and tell them?" I was like, "I really don't care. Just do whatever you want." So I think he's mentioned it to my other two coworkers. They still use she, her, hers pronouns, which he does at work as well, because I think he doesn't really know what I want him to do. Outside of work, he uses they, them, their pronouns, because I've told him that that's what I want to be called. So I'm still kind of in a limbo place with these other coworkers, not really sure if I want to insist that they use the correct pronouns, because pronouns are not a gigantic deal to me. I know for other people it is a huge deal, and I don't begrudge you that at all. For me, it's not a gigantic deal. Like, I won't get really upset if you use she, her pronouns with me. I just think they, them, their fits me better. But other than that, yeah, so my experience has been like amazingly positive, but I feel like I'm just kind of holding myself back at this point, because I know nothing bad is going to happen. It's just afraid of awkward situations, pretty much.
Right. And I've talked about my experience. I don't know. We've done almost 50 episodes of the show, so I can't honestly remember what all I've talked about and not talked about. But I came out publicly before I was able to, be Callie at work. And so I was Callie everywhere but work. And that was actually kind of the biggest part of what I struggled with, like, having to be two different people all the time. And, I initially thought like, well, as long as I'm able to be myself part of the time, that's better than none of the time, which it was at first. But then that dissonance of going back and forth, really, really started to wear on me. And that was actually kind of the most that I struggled with through the whole thing. And, I did high-end audio video installation, home automation, that kind of stuff. And I loved the industry and I loved the job. I mean, the company I could have stood to maybe work for a different company, but like the job that I did was awesome. And I generally liked the people that I worked with, and the people that I worked with in my company were fine. I came out to my boss. It was not a big deal to him personally at all. And, it wasn't a big deal to my coworkers either, but we worked with a lot of contractors, and contractors means construction workers. And that means we spent a lot of time on construction sites. And like, let's just be real. Those stereotypes exist for a reason. Constant misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, all this stuff from people that like, I kind of considered like work friends. You know what I mean? I mean, I wasn't like close to these people or anything like that, but they were work friends. Like I thought they were good people, and maybe otherwise they are good people and they're just ignorant. I don't know. But, being in that environment hurt a lot. And, my boss swore up and down that I was going to be able to transition at work and that all the stuff was going to work out and everything like that. And, long story short, it didn't. And I ended up just having to send my boss a text like, look, I'm sorry, I can't handle this anymore. It's obvious that transition here is not going to work out. So I'm looking for another job. And, so I got the job that I work at now, which has very good policies that are followed very well by management and stuff like that. I had a conversation with HR on my first day. I sent an email to my recruiter asking, what the deal is with the bathroom situation. And, she told me that one of my HR people would come grab me, after our orientation on my first day. And sure enough, they did. And, so we sat down and she was like, yeah, we got your email about, the bathroom question. And she goes, you're comfortable using the women's restroom because that's how you identify, right? And I said, yeah. She's like, well, then that's what we want you to do. And I said, oh, okay. And she was like, she's like, there's not really a specific policy because we just recognize you as how you identify. So as long as that's what you're comfortable with, that's what we expect. And she goes, you're not the first trans person to ever work here. This is not a situation that's new to us. And so, if anyone makes you uncomfortable or gives you problems, you drop what you're doing and you come find me and let me know and it'll be taken care of.
I'll punch him in the face.
Right. I was absolutely floored. It was amazing. So I know it's not all 100% sunshine and roses at my workplace. It's been related to me by other people that there are some people who have said some pretty unkind things behind my back. And I'm not going to pretend like that stuff doesn't sting a little. I mean, I don't lose sleep over it or anything like that. And I've been misgendered a couple of times by people who should know better after being corrected several times, to the point where I'm wondering if it's deliberate, and malicious as opposed to just being mistake. But I've never felt any overt hostility and no one's directly confronted me or anything like that. And I generally have a pretty thick skin, so I'm okay. My worry is that, there are some folks who aren't out that I work with, some trans folks that I work with who aren't out that have approached me. And I'm more worried for them because I came into the workplace as Callie, presenting as Callie and all that sort of stuff. So, I have a little bit of fear for folks who, are going to come out and transition at work and what that experience may be like for them. So, I try and be as supportive as I can to those folks. So, it's mostly positive, a little bit of mix, but mostly positive. My supervisor has been great. I outed herself. Wow. I outed myself to her in one of our coachings once. We were just talking and, and we were getting a little personal, which is cool. Like I think of her as a work friend too. I don't know that I would like go out and have dinner with anything like that, but she's cool. We talk and, and it was just no big deal. And she actually listened to the Trans Day of Remembrance episode of the podcast, which was a really interesting discussion after that. So that's kind of been my experience. So before we jump to a break, I know what I feel like all of our stories kind of were like, I was really nervous, but this actually kind of worked out. And I almost feel bad asking this, but I just have to. Has anyone, in the context of work, had an actual like outright negative experience?
I guess I could jump in there. For me personally, no, other than you're right. When you transition at work, people are getting used to you as a different gender. I'm lucky in that I'm not, bigendered or agender, right? I'm using pronouns that people aren't used to. So, she, her, which is at least they're used to that. But I do get the occasional he, him, and I got that a lot early, and it's petered away as the days have gone by. But I can tell you, as recently as this morning, I got he'd, I believe it's unintentional. And quite frankly, the way that I work is if I'm in a meeting or if I'm with somebody and they do it once, I let it slide. I grit my teeth and that kind of stuff. But after 2 or 3 more, that's when I jump in and I just say, it's she. And correct them. And usually they apologize and off they go. I will also say that it was interesting because, like I said, I thought I was the very first person to transition at my job, at my company. And there was actually somebody in London who was transitioning at exactly the same time. And she unfortunately did not have the wonderful story that I did. And I don't want to tell somebody else's story, but, she was not accepted by her team. And in fact, the HR contacted me several months later to help try to alleviate the situation that she was in because she felt that she was demoted. She felt that the rest of the team was being rude to her. There was a lot of difficult times that she was having, and this is in the exact same company. So you're right; it really does have a lot to do with the people that you surround yourself with, and individuals and leadership.
Yeah, very much so. And the couple of times that I've been misgendered, basically we have a group chat where all the call center agents are in this chat, and we all kind of help each other out and give advice and that kind of stuff. And, there was a guy who I was helping because I had access to a tool that he didn't because he was newer. And so I helped him out, like while I was on another call, like I was helping him while I was on another call just because, I'm trying to be the go-getter and the ambitious one. And so management notices that. So because that's what I do. But after it was over with, I was like, oh yeah, you're good to go. And he goes, thanks a lot, sir. And I just did like the asterisk, ma'am. And he goes, oh, I'm so sorry. And then, but that's happened like 2 times since then. And I'm like, at this point, I have to wonder if it's deliberate,
Well, but I do have to say, when you're not with somebody physically, we've had many years of what I call testosterone poisoning. I have a lower voice than I'd like. And I will tell you the difference between it. If it's a client that calls me sir, I let it slide. If it's a fellow employee who does it, then I correct them.
Right.
And that includes offices where I don't interact with them on a regular basis.
Cool. Well, we are way over time for the segment here, so we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some stories contributed by the listeners and kind of our reactions and if we have any related stories. More Gaytheist Manifesto coming up.
I've struggled with confidence throughout my life, and I've struggled with shame and internalized transphobia and internalized racism and internalized classism. And so I have all that stuff, but there was something in me believed I had something special. Telling the truth to myself about myself is awesome because it's just a relief because I don't have to try to be something I'm not. I can just be. Who you are authentically is all right. The shame is what kills you. Believing that you are unworthy of love and belonging, that who you are authentically is a sin or is wrong, is deadly. Who you are is beautiful and amazing. It's important with all of the messages that might tell you otherwise, that you have that in yourself to say that I am beautiful, I'm smart, and I'm amazing.
Here's an excerpt from Callie's audio journal, produced exclusively for patrons of the Gaytheist Manifesto.
being this far-off fantasy thing that I didn't think would ever happen to being the thing that was just enough in reach to tease me, but so far out of reach that I wasn't sure I'd ever get there. Sometimes it still feels that impossible. But as time goes on, it starts to feel more and more like this is going to happen someday, and that the day that it happens might not be that far off. I can't help but think about what my first time is going to be like. That's a really weird thought to be having at 31 years old. Anyone who listens to the show knows that I'm a pretty openly sexual person, and it's very possible for me to enjoy sexuality the way things are now, but I'm not sure I'll ever be able to.
For access to this and more, join the movement. Go to patreon.com/The Gaytheist to learn more.
Welcome back to the Gaytheist Manifesto. Today we're sharing stories and talking about navigating the workplace as, being out, being secular, being atheist, being queer, being trans. So this segment we actually had quite a few stories submitted by listeners, and there's a pretty good diversity of experience here. So I think it'll be cool and kind of eye opening to get more than just a couple of people's perspectives. So Ari, do you want to start with the first one?
All right. This first one is from Donna. From a gay atheist perspective, it was more awkward with the gay thing. The atheist thing isn't really an issue. It's more interesting when you actually come across a religious person. We have more Hindus than any other religion in my work, and they aren't anti-atheist or anything. It wasn't an issue when I was pagan either. Most were intrigued. I mentioned being gay to one colleague, and she couldn't hide her shock, but tried her best to recover. Another time I heard two guys making jokes about man-eating dykes. I emailed the second guy and said, "You should be careful what you say because you never know who could be listening," smiley face. He asked me who was gay, and I said I was. I was super nervous, but I laughed at his, "But you're too pretty to be gay." I've educated him since then. I'm not super open about it, but I work out whether people are likely to cause issues on things they may not like before replacing partner with girlfriend or she.
Yeah, I have a work story about you trying to couch your language to not out yourself when you're unsure. Mm-hmm. I had a coworker who, someone I really liked and turned out to be, a pretty cool work friend until she quit. But she asked me if I had a boyfriend, and my initial thought was like, wow, that the answer to that question is far more complicated than you think it is, my friend. But I just let it go, and I just said, no, I don't have a boyfriend, because I like boys. I didn't, and I didn't in fact have a boyfriend. So I just let that slide. And then eventually I was talking about how, my finances were super tight because I was like making double my car payments because my car was still in my ex's name. And she said ex-boyfriend. I was like, ex-girlfriend, actually. And she gave me the head cocked to the side thing, like, huh?
Aru?
Yeah. And she's like, you like girls? And I was like, well, I'm bi, actually. And so we had a little bit of that conversation, and that was fine. And then a day or two later, she turns around and goes, "So what do you think about this Bruce Jenner situation?" I was like, damn it, okay. I'm gonna have to do it. So
you are now the token queer.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So yeah. Anybody else have an experience that parallels with that?
I would say outside. So it's funny because inside of work now, we don't. I learned a long time ago in work, you don't talk about politics or religion. You leave those at the side, or you'll never make friends. So
exactly,
we leave those quite alone. But it was funny when I first came out to my father, who happens to be a priest. Or a preacher. I said, by the way, blah, 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 and I'm trans. And he took a step and he looked at me and he goes, "Well, have you tried being gay?" So I understood on the totem pole where trans was compared to gay. Now, right. This is 2-3 years ago. And so I met up with him just a few months ago, and we were at dinner and we were speaking, and we had gone to the old church where I had grown up, and I mentioned to him, I go, yeah, by the way, I'm an atheist too. And he's like, huh, have you tried being agnostic? So what I've learned is,
wow,
exactly, that I think the atheist was actually more of a surprise than the trans. That's one. And two, there's always a totem pole. Well, if you're
right.
this, have you tried being something less bombastic? Have you tried something a little lower on the totem pole just to see if that would work for you instead? So, that's my atheist and trans coming out story.
Because being trans is just being really, really gay.
Yeah, it's like gay to the extreme.
Exactly. Well, my answer to him was, yes, Dad, I've tried being gay, but it's not the same thing.
which is fair. God. Okay, so next story comes from Kristen. Kristen says, I'll share experiences with both. Coming out as atheist wasn't actually a thing at work. I had atheist bumper stickers on my car, but I never really talked about it with anyone. No one brought it up either, except for one guy. Big burly guy who looked like he'd fit on the Duck Dynasty show. Which, that's funny. He asked if it was my car, and I said yes. Turns out he was also an atheist. He knew I was big on listening to podcasts at work and asked what I listened to. So that's pretty cool. And also, Kristen, for reference, anyone who remembers the Mormon episode, this is Kristen from the Mormons episode. Friend of the show. Aside from that, atheism never came up in the workplace, and I never brought it up in discussion. Gender transition was super awkward at this job, though. I've been on HRT for months, and it was becoming obvious that something was going on. Whispers and rumors circulated in the workplace, and eventually I just went to my supervisor and explained what's going on. Aside from my physical appearance and name, nothing else would change and no special accommodations are necessary. Business as usual. A few weeks later, I was called into HR and sat with them to explain everything. He had a lot of questions, and I repeatedly assured him that nothing of any importance is going to change in the workplace, and I will continue to do my job as I was before. Then he dropped a bombshell. I was told not to use the men's or women's restroom until HR figures out what to do. No bathrooms were made available at work for me, and I had to drive to 7-Eleven every time I had to go. This went on for a couple of months. No bathroom access of any kind at work. Then news of the big boss from Japan was coming to inspect the warehouse. Suddenly, HR picked the single occupancy women's restroom, ripped out the lockers of the other women working there, and put them in another restroom. One of my female coworkers was shocked, confused, and angry. HR didn't explain anything to them. The other female coworkers were just told not to use that restroom anymore. Go somewhere else. My female coworkers were pissed at me for weeks under the impression that I was being weird and perverted. Eventually, we sat down together on our lunch breaks, and I explained to them what was going on and what HR was supposed to explain to them. Afterwards, everyone knew what was going on. Initially, people still called me by my old name and male pronouns, but I never bothered to correct them. I always let it go. Eventually, the wrong name and gender references faded away on their own. HR was still a royal pain to fight with on health insurance. The policy was owned and paid for by the company, but Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield was hired as a third party to run the operations. It was a constant battle for basic coverage as everything was segregated by gender. Having the flu as a male is considered distinctly different from having the flu as a female. Same illness, but if the paperwork didn't match the gender, the claim was denied. The insurance plan constantly flip-flopped on my gender. If I filed as female, they would claim I racked up charges as a male and thus not covered. If I filed as male, they would claim I racked up charges as a female and thus not covered. It got so bad that I started looking into suing the company for sex discrimination and made my intentions to sue perfectly clear. The flip-flopping eventually stopped and I was finally able to be covered, but the bills beforehand were still stuck on me even to this day. So if anyone's looking for a blueprint of what HR shouldn't do in a situation like this, holy crap.
I can't believe they made her go to another business just to use the restroom.
Well, I mean, there's so many reasons. It's very funny because I speak with a lot of trans people, and sometimes they're very much about, well, I'm just going to sue. I'm going to sue. Everybody wants to sue, and this is one of the few cases that I'm hearing where this person has a case. I mean, this is not just you have to give somebody bathroom facilities that they can use under your policies, period. You got to pee. I'm sorry, you got to pee, and going to 7-Eleven is not an option. So this is actually a very sad story here. I think one of the things that, Callie's involved in this, I'm involved in this, is we're seeing a lot more companies that are bringing in speakers to talk to both HR and just the entire company about transitioning employees or just what it means to be trans. I've had several of the banks here locally who have invited me in to talk with several other people. I think it's becoming more and more common to talk about it, especially over the last year where there's been so much media coverage about it. So it's an interesting topic. But at the end of the day, we are a very small population. And so HR is not dealing with this every day. And so that's why when I transitioned, I tried to work as hard as I could to make HR's job as easy as possible. And I know not everybody can do that, but it goes a long way to be a little lenient, but at the same time, that's a terrible story. I'm sorry. I can't give them any sympathy whatsoever on the HR side.
Yeah, that's just, and you're right. I mean, you definitely, there is cause to give people a little grace sometimes, because a lot of times you're dealing with good-hearted people who just don't know what they're doing. And you got to give people some room to get that stuff figured out before you come down too hard on them. But yeah, that's just, there is no excuse for that.
I'm pretty sure you don't need months to figure out which restroom to ask this person to use.
Exactly.
That should not take that long.
Exactly. Ari, you want to read the next one?
Yes, this is from Ashley. I'm completely stealth at work on both accounts of being an atheist and being transgender. I don't know if anyone thinks I'm trans or an atheist, but no one has ever said anything. We have awesome policies where I work, and bigotry or discrimination would not be tolerated. However, I think I like it better stealth. I don't choose the people I work with, and I can't just not hang out with them anymore if they don't agree with who I am or what I support. I would rather not risk any kind of conflict while I'm at work. I don't bring most of the rest of my personal life with me to work either. Outside of work, I'm out to everyone about everything and will talk at great lengths to anyone who will listen. In some ways, being at work is time off from the work I do and the rest of my life, trying to raise awareness about transgender people, atheism, and everything else I support. I don't know if I'll always stay stealth, but I'm comfortable right now.
I hear that. And, there are a lot of people in the trans community who are critical of people who stay stealth. And I'm not good with that. I don't like that at all. I'm very much for one's choice to live, however makes you comfortable. If you'd rather not advertise to the world that you're trans, you shouldn't feel obligated to do so. I personally do in some ways when it's to a certain level of safety, because I think visibility is helpful, but I would never try to foist that on anyone as a thing that they should or shouldn't be doing. And the other thing that I was thinking of in terms of this, because, what comes up a lot is, people being openly secular or openly atheist at work. And what a lot of people don't understand is you don't necessarily have to be having a conversation about religion for that stuff to come up. Mm-hmm. My supervisor, I happen to mention that I do a podcast without thinking about it. And she's like, well, what's your podcast about? And I'm like,
Stuff.
And, when I'm taking time off work, just in conversation, she's like, oh, you taking a vacation? Where are you headed? Like, well, I'm going to an atheist convention, actually. You know what I mean? It's not even necessarily, you have to be talking about debating religion at work, because that's obviously not a thing you want to do at work. That's not what you're there for. But, just like being queer, obviously being trans is a different thing, but even just being queer, if you're talking about your family and oh, hey, we're having a company grill out. Well, guess everybody's going to know I'm gay now. Because a lot of times you hear the sentiment of well, why does anybody at work have to know anyways? And it's well, being at work doesn't mean you don't share anything ever at all of yourself personally with the people you work with. I mean, because if you're queer, you can't not talk. You can't talk about your family without outing yourself. And a lot of times you can't talk about your hobbies without outing yourself. If your hobbies have to do with, I'm really big into this queer meetup group that I do, or, I lead my local atheist meetup group. You know what I mean? People never feel hesitant to say, hey, I'm super active in my church group. Even if they're not preaching or proselytizing, it's fine. It's what they do. They spend a lot of time in their church group. It's fine. But people like us have to feel more hesitant to say I'm pretty active in the local atheist community, because that's seen, just declaring yourself, identifying yourself as such, can be interpreted by some people as being like, oh, well, now you're pushing atheism on me, and that's totally not the case.
Well, and I would be just my advice for this person is to be, it is going to leak back at some point if you're at a job long enough. And so I would put aside the paperwork. I would put aside your messaging. I would put it in a glass box that you could smash with a hammer when it happens. And,
that's a good idea.
and be ready for it, because the best thing you can do is be proud and move forward and essentially say, yeah, that's who I am. And if you want to know anything about it, I'm more than willing to talk to you about it, but I've got work to do. The other thing, just really quickly, though, is on the atheism side, it's interesting because religion is such a protected thing, especially in corporate America. They're scared to death about being sued because of some religious thing or something else. Atheism, on the other hand, it's interesting because you're actually there's a right to freedom of religion, but not freedom of non-religion. And so there's actually some interesting court cases that are coming up right now with the Supreme Court that have to talk about getting in trouble for not using free speech as opposed to speech. And so it will be interesting to see what those decisions make, and if that leaks over into the other rights like religion.
Yeah, that's a good call. Next is from Joshua. Joshua says, I live in the conservative state of Wyoming and work in a refinery, which is very hyper-masculine. I only recently realized I was non-binary, but have been openly atheist for quite some time. I actually feel like I'm likely the only liberal atheist in the entire refinery. This can be difficult when discussion comes up about quote-unquote the gays, global warming being a hoax, Obama's gun grab, etc., as I am very much outnumbered and choose to pick my battles. I have not fully come out to my coworkers, only going so far as to come out as queer following a heated exchange over politics one night a few months back. Considering the transphobic jokes about Caitlyn Jenner, I feel like they wouldn't understand identifying outside the gender binary. Joshua, I feel like you are correct. I feel like that's a very accurate assessment of the situation. Yeah, that's so hard because none of those people think of themselves as having inappropriate conversations at work. But the second you challenge them as a member of the minority by even just saying, I disagree, then you're the one causing problems. And it's super unfortunate that things work out that way. But I mean, you run into the same dynamics when you're the only liberal person in the family. Everybody can say all the most horrible stuff they want about Caitlyn Jenner, about gay people, about Obama, about racism and stuff like that. But the moment you speak up and disagree, you're the one causing problems.
Right.
Yeah, because if you just agreed with them, there wouldn't be a problem.
Exactly.
Well, exactly. And that's the thing is you at a certain point, you have to decide to pick your battles. If you want this job, you want to stay with this job, and it's a pain in the rear because of these folks, then you make that decision. Otherwise, work hard and try to find something else that's a little bit more compatible. I mean, there is work out there. There are communities out there, and unfortunately, we live in a very mixed society where there's certain people we are just not going to be able to change, and unfortunately, they tend to clump together in the construction industry for some reason. I don't know.
Oh, that was great. Oh, wow. That caught me off guard. That was good.
Sorry. I can edit it out in post. There you go.
Yeah, that's good. Ari, do you want to read the next one?
Okay. This is from Julia. I transitioned at my job last year, and I feel very fortunate to work for a company where HR works so closely with me to support my needs, and where my coworkers have accepted me without issue. I work in an industry, craft brewing, that is simultaneously hyper-masculine and blue-collar while being super liberal, and the intersection of all that worried me to death at first. But the industry has been nothing but positive and accepting so far. I've been openly atheist for far longer than I've been openly trans, which has not put a damper on my brewing career to my knowledge, but it does add a degree of separation. Being openly trans and atheist has made my life a hell of a lot better, but there's definitely a bit of isolation involved there, and I'm fairly certain that I lost a job back in my old industry, due in part to my open atheism.
That's super interesting. The intersection of being super hyper masculine and blue collar while being super liberal at the same time. Because those, I mean, if we're speaking in generalities, obviously, we don't want to, we don't want to act like these things are boxes that people can't step outside of. But those aren't things that you generally hear going together too much. So I thought that was really interesting.
Well, I have to disagree, actually, and because I got to tell you, with the modern version, which is the lumbersexual, I have found that these guys in flannel and beard are remarkably liberal. They're remarkably welcoming. Even though if you were to look at them 10 years ago dressed as they were, you'd be scared to death of them. They look at themselves as Renaissance men. They are men's men, and yet they can accept others, which I'm very, very happy about.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. The thing about adding a degree of separation, I kind of hear that too, because it definitely does make me feel like, because, I know that, quote, people have said hurtful things behind my back, but I don't necessarily know who those people are. So, when I'm talking to anyone that I work with, a lot of times it's hard for me to not be like, are you the one? Like, are you the one smiling to my face, asking for my help and being super nice and then calling me a he, she behind my back? Like, that's, yeah. So that's really hard. So I definitely, I can definitely understand that feeling. So this one's from Mary, and this one's short. So I'm really glad about this. Mary says, coming out and not glad that it's short. I'm glad for the story and the sentiment that it expressed. Wow, yeah, that sounded really bad.
Really got Mary here.
Yeah, I love you, Mary. Coming out and working in Seattle is amazing. It's been so much of a non-issue that my boss even asked if he needed to order me new uniforms that express my transition better. I was floored. Well, go Mary's boss.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I don't even really have anything more to say about that. Like, that's cool.
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, I've heard that about Seattle.
Yeah, if you're a boss, take note. That's how you do it.
Well, and just really out quickly, so one of our offices is in Seattle, and Seattle is amazing. But I got to tell you, it was interesting when I transitioned in Cincinnati, the feedback from national HR was, we were expecting this someday, but Cincinnati? Really? They're first? And so I just got to tell you, I've lived in Cincinnati for 15 years. I've done I did drag for a long time. I've been part of the LGBT community for a long time, and Cincinnati is actually a pretty good community. So you can give props to Seattle, sure, but you will find your community wherever you live, hopefully, especially if it's a major city. So, you don't have to run to New York or LA or San Francisco in order to be supported anymore. There are pockets of people. There are communities that are out there. It's a lot easier to find those folks.
Oh, yeah, I very much agree. I was really, really surprised by Cincinnati. I mean, there are definitely plenty of problematic things and problematic people that happen in Cincinnati and the queer community in Cincinnati. That being said, generally speaking, I was pretty shocked, at the amount of people who are into this and do this work in Cincinnati. So I was really pleasantly surprised by that. And I mean, I've met, I've made friendships and met with and gotten to know a lot of really, really great people out of it. So yeah, definitely don't want to necessarily talk bad about Cincinnati in that way. It has its problems for sure, but I feel like, every city is going to, so.
I'm not talking down Cincinnati. I'm just saying Seattle, it's cool.
Right. I mean, it's all right. It's all right.
It's all right.
All right. Ari, you want to read the last one?
All right. This is from Linda. I'm a trans woman in my early 50s. I transitioned completely at work in 2009. I'm very lucky that I live in California because in 2012, they strengthened the anti-discrimination laws for LGBT people. I've worked at the same job with a Southern California school district since 2000. It took me till 1997 to realize that most people are happy with their assigned gender. It may sound funny, but I thought everyone was unhappy with their gender and it was just part of being human. After reading hundreds of blogs, I figured out that I'm a transgender woman. For years, I tried to ignore and suppress my feelings. In 2009, I was at my breaking point. I was miserable having to pretend I was a man. I told my boss at the school I was working at that I was a transgender woman. He did not respond well. My therapist urged me to contact my personnel department. They all took the right steps. I was very lucky. They moved me to another location. Then they had a transgender person from a local LGBT center give a transgender 101 seminar to all my coworkers. It's been over 6 years now, and coming out at work was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. I still have a long way to go in my transition journey, but I'm 100 times more happy than I was before I transitioned. Other than help from my therapist, I did this by myself. If you are transgender, please seek out help from your local LGBT center. There are tons of us out here. You don't need to take this journey alone.
Go, Linda.
Yeah.
That's
Very
awesome.
nice.
Yeah, and that's something that I think there is a lot of confusion around. I have a friend who likes to say that it's never too late to be happy, and I definitely think that's true. I came out and started transition at 28 years old, and I was worried if it was too late for me, and here's Linda, and I've met people who wait until their 60s or 70s to transition for one reason or another, and you can be happy and you can lead a fulfilling and meaningful life, even if you wait till later to do it. It's never too late to be happy. So I'm 100% behind this. I love it. Also, one thing that stood out to me with this is that it may sound funny, but I thought everyone was unhappy with their gender, and it was just part of being human, which is, I feel like so many trans people I would imagine have to feel that way. Like, I don't know that I ever necessarily felt that way, but like, given how isolated you can feel, especially, growing up in the time that Linda was growing up, where, transgender is just not even a word that people use. Trans people just don't exist, in that world. I can just imagine, like, you would just assume, like, well, I guess this is just how everyone feels. Right. Although my experience was more like, I am some sort of disgusting freak because I feel this way, so I better not tell anyone. Was kind of more my experience.
So I'm slightly older than Callie, so I would just say that. I'm not going to out myself that way.
You're like 33.
That's right. Yeah, maybe a month older. And so, it's interesting because if you look at, pop culture, for instance, there's the classic stereotype of the put upon at home mother who just kind of really hates her life there, but she's struggling along. And then there's the put upon henpecked male who's out there working as hard as he can and coming home and getting beat up for being stupid. And, so when you only have those two binaries to look at, and you're trying to figure out about yourself, and especially if you're different, it can be very difficult because you can look at being, you can be looking at being male and go, well, all the men must be miserable because this sucks. Being a guy sucks. And it's really until you have therapy, you know other people, you can dive into yourself and really figure out, no, this is a true gender thing. This is something that else is going on. And it's amazing for me as a older person how quickly over the last few years things like this have changed. Callie's podcast here is amazing because, trust me, 3 years ago, this wouldn't happen. 3-4 years ago, this wouldn't happen. And it's just over the last year or two that just the acceleration of both transgender and atheism and other fringe groups, as they used to be called, it's just absolutely amazing as somebody who, grew up during the 70s and couldn't even consider this as a possibility.
Very cool. Well, we are going to take another quick break here, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about how we can be better allies to folks who are coming out, folks who are transitioning in the workplace, and what we can kind of do to make life easier for those folks. So more Atheist Manifesto after this.
You say I don't know I'm beautiful, but what if I did? Wouldn't you just call me a bitch? Wouldn't you say that I was stuck up or vain or some other kind of unnecessary bullshit? Wouldn't you try to cut my confidence down to half its size so that you could swoop in and tell me I don't know I'm beautiful? As if this was some sort of surprise? Well, I have news for you. I am not a parking ticket looking for your validation. Your songs filled with sweet nothings are no longer allowed to park for free. They're no longer allowed to cheapen my self-esteem. You say I don't know I'm beautiful, but what if I did? What if I looked in the mirror and actually liked what I saw? Makeup or no makeup, flaws and all. What if I woke up really feeling myself and could post a selfie to Instagram without any self-doubt? No questions, contemplations, or hesitations, because the only person's confirmation I would need is my own. You say I don't know I'm beautiful, but what if I did? What if I accepted compliments at face value instead of constantly feeling the need to devalue myself for the sake of someone else? No, stop. You're just saying that to be nice. You're just saying that because you're my friend. If you've ever caught yourself saying these words, please take a moment and think again. Please take a moment to marvel at the radiance of your beauty, both on the outside and from within. Don't be afraid to be a woman who likes herself. There is no need to love your body with trepidation, because that bottomless pit of hesitation that you feel are only false expectations appearing real. So don't let your fear get the best of you, because every part of you is the best of you. And if that is a crime, if this just so happens to offend everyone else, I guess I'll be doing bad all by myself.
And welcome back to the Gaytheist Manifesto. In this segment, we are going to talk about how we can be better allies to each other in the workplace, whether we're talking about people who are secular, people who are queer, people who are trans. I wanted to kind of give everyone a shot here at some general advice, both for so basically we're kind of looking at two concepts here. We're talking about for people who are in the closet in the workplace, you know, how to navigate that and, you know, how best to handle that. And then also for allies, you know, what people who are allies can do, not only once people have come out and begun the transition process, but also what you can do to sort of subtly identify yourself as someone who is an ally. So people at work know that you are a person who is an ally without having to overtly just, you know, slap a rainbow sticker on your forehead and walk around at work all day. So Stevie, you were pretty quiet in the last segment, so I'm going to give you the first shot at this. What are your thoughts on the whole thing here?
Okay. So I don't know. I'd say, like, if you're in the closet, I would, if you're really not sure of the situation, really get a gauge of what other people, like, what their views might be, just how conversations are. Like, do people seem more conservative or liberal with what they're talking about? That might help you get somewhat good gauge on things. Definitely make sure you have somebody that you trust that you're talking to through that, whether it be like somebody like a therapist or an adult mentor or a friend with experience in the workplace. Because I know that definitely helped me coming out. And everybody has their own method, you know. Some people will be really direct about it and will just go up to their boss and say, hey, this is who I am. And there's people like me who need to email and really are not good at confronting people. And I think it's best to really know yourself and what you're going to say to people when you're coming out and have that prepared, because sometimes you really don't know what the situation is going to be. Yeah, that's about what I'd offer for that. And I mean, as far as allies go, really being supportive and asking if they're tripping up, like asking, you know, to be called out on certain things, like kind of like how my boss was mentioning, if I'm doing something wrong, let me know, or if I can do anything to accommodate you, let me know, and just tell me what you need. And, focusing on the person who is being vulnerable, which is the person coming out, and focusing on what their needs are in the situation and in the workplace, because depending on your workplace, it could be a tough situation, and it's good to have at least one coworker or somebody who is an ally if you're really in a situation where you think people might be unfriendly when you're coming out.
Yeah, I think the bit about asking to be called out on things, I think that's huge, because I know for me, even as forward of a person as I can be sometimes, and I'm very outspoken. I'm kind of the definition of extroverted, but there are still some times where I shy away from that kind of conflict, especially in the context of being trans. So I think going out of your way to let someone know that it's okay to correct you if you get things wrong, like, I think that's super hugely important, especially in a workplace environment, because the boundaries are so much different in a workplace environment than they are in a personal in a personal space. So I think letting that person know, like, look, this is a thing that I want to get right, and in pursuit of that, if I get it wrong, I want you to tell me. I want you to let me know, because it's important for me to get it right. So I think that's very huge. I think that's a great call out. So Jen, what are your thoughts?
Wow. Thank you, Steve. Geez, I'm gonna split this in two really quickly. So, as far as being an atheist is concerned, like I was saying, I like to keep religion out of work, and the only thing that I would ask is that, just like any religion, if other people are not following it, it's really just best to put that aside. So if you are an atheist, be a proud atheist, but you don't necessarily need to put the Darwin symbol on your desktop computer. You're there to work with others, and continue to move forward. Now, I know that it's a little difficult sometimes because we live in a predominantly Christian society, and some Christians are very proud of their religion, and it's hard for them not to proselytize. But at the same time, we can be the better people if we just sort of take that out of our work lives. That's just my advice. This is the way I am. On the trans side, I have to say, especially after being outed by somebody else, you need to prioritize your life. You need to say, what is the most important thing to me? If being stealth is what's important to you, then continue to be stealth. If you really, really need to transition, just do it in a smart way. Learn what the rules are. Learn if you're in a different state that has different protections. Make sure you understand what those are. And at the end of the day, your job is your job, but your life is your life. And if you need to transition, you might need to go someplace else. I know some people really love their jobs, but you may need to go someplace else in order to just be you. I've been lucky. Callie has been lucky that we've been able to transition on the job, and people have, for the most part, accepted us. But that's not the case in all industries, in all businesses. And remember, there's a lot of us out there. We reach out for advice, reach out for support. But at the end of the day, you need to take care of yourself and do what's most important for you.
Yeah, I think that's huge. There's no amount of money and there's no job that's worth being abjectly miserable.
Correct.
I think there are probably very few people in their in the world who are just like 100% absolutely stoked, couldn't think of anything better to do with their lives about their job. But generally speaking, I get up and I'm not mad that I'm going to work. I generally like solving problems. I like dealing with technology. My coworkers are good. So if I wouldn't sit there and take phone calls from people about technology if I didn't have to do it to get paid for it, but generally speaking, I generally enjoy what I do, and considering how difficult my job is, I'm paid pretty well for it. So I think that's important. You don't have to, because I feel like a lot of people feel like they're obligated to be activists, in all situations. And I mean, honestly, I'm one of those people in a lot of ways. But I think, it's okay to think of yourself too in those situations. And, if you feel like you're getting a raw deal at work and you feel like you can get a better deal somewhere else, sometimes it's okay to just give up and let go and get yourself into a better position for your own health and your own safety. I don't think there's anything wrong with that or anything shameful about that.
Right. And that's the only other thing that I was going to say. So you were asking about allies. And the big thing about allies is, remember, not all of us are activists. We don't have all the answers. We can't. I mean, I got asked about gender 30 times after transitioning. I don't have an opinion on gender other than I wish there was a lot more representation out there besides her. Exactly. And so, I do know a whole lot. I speak quite a bit. But I am, I'm the corner case of the corner case. There are plenty of transitioning people who simply want to disappear, take a magic pill, and come back and their lives be completely changed. And I think that as an ally, you can help as much as you can with that process. If you have somebody that is transitioning and they say that I'm now female, make sure you work on those pronouns. And there are some very good top 10 lists about, hey, how to apologize or not to apologize and all this kind of stuff, and what questions to ask and not ask, because it is, it can be, if you're a cis person who's never experienced a trans person before, I'm sure there's a lot of questions that you want to ask. But at the same time, I'm not going to ask you about your parts. I'm not going to ask you about a lot of different things health-wise, especially in the work environment. It's not appropriate. So, just be a good person. At the end of the day, we'll forgive a lot because we're going through a lot too, as trans people. And so, it's just we really more care about, your ability to, give us the time to do it and your ability to support us in any way you can. And that sometimes means holding back your own urges, either to be like a super ally all of a sudden or to just be super curious.
Very, very cool. Ari, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with Jen and with you, Callie, what you were saying about, taking things at your own pace, I think is really important. People a lot of times compare themselves to others in ways that maybe it's not healthy for them to do. So if you, for example, if you don't want to come out, don't feel pressured to. If, for example, you live in a state where that could put your job at risk, or even if you live in a state where it's protected, if you just don't feel comfortable doing it, don't feel pressured to do it. Be kind to yourself. You're not obligated to do anything that would make you unhappy or make you uncomfortable. For a lot of times, since you're spending a lot of time at work. If at your workplace, if someone else has maybe transitioned or come out as gay or bi or atheist or anything, don't feel like you have to do it as well, if it's not something that you're comfortable with. Also, like Stevie was saying, if you do decide that you want to come out, there are lots of different ways that you can do it. There's not a textbook I have to go and set up a meeting with the boss and, give a big formal introduction, like Jen did, standing up in front of however many people and saying, by the way, I'm changing my name and my pronouns and all this stuff. If you want to do that and that's something that your company encourages you to do, definitely go for it. If you're more comfortable in a small setting, go for that. Again, just going back to do whatever makes you, the happiest, because that's what this is about, really, is about you being happy and comfortable. As far as for allies, a few different things. First thing I would say is, do not out people who come to you in confidence.
3 or 4 times, say it real loud, draw a circle around it, put stars around it.
Unless you are 1,000% sure that this person is okay, if you've asked them and say, is it okay if I tell whoever, and they say, yes, tell whoever you want, or that they've already told everyone in your workplace, then it's okay. But But if you are not sure in any way, do not go, spouting off people's different things, because if they haven't told someone, there's probably a good reason why they haven't told someone, and it could make things really difficult if they hear it from somebody else. What was the other thing I was going to say? Crap. Use your privilege. Privilege power. If you hear anyone or see anyone being disrespectful, using the wrong name on purpose, using the wrong pronouns on purpose, making transphobic, homophobic jokes, anything like that, don't just let it slide, because there are people who wish they could say something who can't say something because it might make things really difficult for you. So not to say that you should speak for people. For example, if that person is totally out to everyone, you should probably maybe make them aware of it so that they can handle it. But if not, don't just say, well, I don't know, I don't really want to say anything, even though I totally don't agree with that. Try and use your place of privilege to make things a little bit easier for other people. So don't let people be jerks. Yeah,
that's all good stuff. I'm trying to think if I have anything to add that hasn't already been said. One thing that I will say is, if you're a person who is in the closet, who is struggling with this kind of thing, and one of your worries is how this is going to affect your work environment and your work life. One thing that I would look at, especially if you work for a bigger company, is see if there's an LGBT employee resource group, because a lot of bigger companies have them. And, you might be able to find someone that you can reach out to anonymously. I mean, obviously, anytime you reach out to someone, there's a risk, because you never know, especially if you don't know that person, because you never know if that person, if the head of the group is a gay person, that they may not necessarily be trans competent. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. So it's always a risk. Obviously, it's always a risk, but you may be able to find support there. I have had several people that I work with approach me after working there, and who have let me know, hey, me too. But that experience and that story belongs to them. So I don't want to get into really any more detail than that. But if you're a person who is out at work, don't. If you're comfortable, of course, no one should feel obligated to take any sort of position like this. But, I very much feel like, this is a thing that I've been through, and I have, a relative privilege in that, I don't struggle with things from day to day, at least not bad enough that it, negatively affects my life. So, I've got the ability to stand up and have those fights and have those conversations with people. So it's something that I'm very willing to do. And if if you're a person who has the capacity and the ability to do those things, you might be able to affect some real change at work doing that. Obviously it's a lot different at work than it is other places, and it's important to keep that in mind. But I think that's an important thing too. I think knowing your company policy is super important. If assuming the company, has one, because obviously a lot of small businesses don't. I feel like the bigger company you work for, the more likely they are to have these policies. And one thing that I will point out is, HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, not a perfect organization. They have their problems for sure, but they do have a corporate equality index where they send out surveys to these companies, and these companies are rated based on their queer and trans inclusiveness. And to get a perfect score, you have to have very inclusive health insurance. You have to have an enumerated anti-discrimination policy that includes gender identity and expression. You have to be, at least on a corporate level, pretty trans friendly to get 100%. And I was actually kind of surprised at how many companies have 100%. And that's actually the reason that I applied for the company that I work for, is because they did have 100%. And in all their job ads, they spell out, that they don't discriminate, and they spell out gender identity and gender expression. So it was very, because most of the time non-discrimination laws don't cover that. So if a company decides to, that means that they've done it because they want to, because they think it's the right thing to do, at least on some level. And obviously, as some of the earlier stories have demonstrated, having that policy doesn't always mean that it's perfectly followed or well executed, but it's at least a step in the right direction. So I think, educating yourself on the company and the company's policies and that kind of thing is super important. And then, like Ari said, making whatever decision and taking whatever path makes the most sense for you. If that means, you tell HR today and I am out and transition tomorrow as far as work's concerned, then awesome, do that. If it's a longer drawn out process for you, like, that's okay. Don't feel pressured to be any one thing or do any one thing because, other people seem like it's the right thing to do. It's never a bad idea to try and make things easier on other people if you can, but I also don't think it's necessarily the wrong thing to put yourself first in that situation because it is your journey.
Right. And that's the thing is you don't have to take abuse, but at the same time, to do this, to transition, you do have to have a thick skin. You have to be able to, and so there's a fine line there. And so, give people the benefit of the doubt, but be prepared for some obstacles.
Absolutely. And as far as allies go, I think the best thing that an ally can do for a person at work is to treat them like this is all normal. I didn't transition while on the job. So, maybe I'm speaking a little outside of my experience, but I can just say for me, the thing that has always made me feel the best is for people to act like, well, this is just normal now. This is who you are, and that's it. It's not I'm going to fawn over you and make a big deal over you because I think this is awesome that you've come out and you're transitioning and all that kind of stuff. And all that stuff is great. I don't necessarily mean to criticize people who do that because they're well-meaning and they're excited because it's an exciting thing to finally be able to be who you are. But it's such a stressful experience. So much of what we try to do after we come out is to try to get back to normal, where we're just living our lives as normal people again. And I think, one of the most helpful things that you can do is to just feed into that normalcy. I'm going to get your name right. I'm going to get your pronouns right. And when I mess up, you apologize, but don't make it a 10-minute conversation because then you just make it worse. And then I think another thing that's important is, there are ways that you can identify yourself as an ally subtly to people without having to, have those political and religious discussions at work. You don't necessarily have to, walk in with a pride flag wrapped around your neck because gay marriage is legal now. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be that overt, but, you can, if somebody makes an inappropriate joke, you don't have to attack that person. You don't have to come at them aggressively, but you can just be like, nah, I didn't think it was that funny. I don't think being gay is funny. I don't think being trans is funny. You know what I mean? You don't have to attack someone and be aggressive. It can just be as simple as if those conversations are happening and somebody's having a laugh fest over Caitlyn Jenner, just not participating in that and making sure that people recognize that you're not participating in that. I think that goes a long way. So you're not attacking anyone. They don't have anything to argue against you with. You're just like, meh, not my conversation. I don't think it's funny. And I think that can go a long way because I know for me, when I first started at the job that I'm at now, I was watching very, very closely to the conversations people would have. And, when certain things would come up, like if somebody else brought up the Supreme Court decision, the impending Supreme Court decision, obviously, at the time that I started, this was still, 5 or 6 months away, hearing how other people talked about it and, deciding to just kind of casually drop in, a couple of my coworkers were having a discussion about their celebrity crushes. And I'm like, wow, should I talk about how in love I am with, oh God, what's her name?
You can't be that in love with her if you can't even remember her name.
I know. I'm terrible. From
Valentine's Day is coming up,
No, well, and I'm not talking about my girlfriend. I am very much in love with my girlfriend, but this is before we even met. Hendricks. Her last name's Hendricks. She's on Mad Men. The redhead.
Oh, Christina.
Christina Hendricks, yes.
Not that I know who that is at all.
Right. But I was like, should I mention that I'm like totally in love with Christina Hendricks and just like see what they say? And so I did. They were talking about their celebrity crushes, and I was like, yeah, I've kind of got a thing for Christina Hendricks. And most people didn't even bat an eye. They were just like, oh yeah. And I had this one guy just kind of, his eyes kind of got kind of big, and he just kind of nodded like, oh, all right.
And I do have to say that, like I said, one of the things to be careful with is not to also become the token transition trans person.
Yes.
So we had somebody coming in from out of town that we were trying to woo to work for our company. She was really high up, and apparently the person who was having dinner
I see
with
where this is going.
The night before said, we found out she was a lesbian. She's covered with tattoos. She's got all these piercings and all this kind of stuff. And in this guy's mind, he goes, who she needs to talk to is Jen. And so the next day, at the last minute, I'm being asked to come in and do an interview with this person. And she's lovely, a wonderful person, and we had a nice chat. But I'm like, why am I interviewing you? What's going on? And it wasn't until afterwards, and when I talked to the person who was setting up the interviews, that they wanted to show how progressive the company was and how amazing Cincinnati could be for people who are different. And I'm like, well, then ask me next time. Don't just throw me into that. That's not why I'm here. I'm more than happy to educate. I'm more than happy to talk to people about how amazing my company is and my own experience. But don't put me out there as this shiny token to show that we have one. Therefore, we're good. You should join us.
Oh, God, that is painful. God, the whole time you were telling that story, I'm like, oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah.
Have you met Jen, our trans?
Exactly. I think we have a furry somewhere in processing. Let's find out.
And what's funny is I work with someone who is out and very open about being a furry.
There you go.
And it's actually really funny how many people I find out at work who are part of, we'll call them the fringe groups, as the polite language. And like, you'll just overhear somebody, like you overhear just a random conversation where a guy's talking about his boyfriend or a girl's talking about her girlfriend. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, I actually work with a lot of queer people. Like, this is cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I am really, really excited that this happened. But we are running way over time. So, I definitely want to thank the both of you, Stevie and Jen, for being open with your experiences and, for being willing to come on the show and talk. So, Stevie, Jen, thank you both very much for joining the show.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
I wish I had that fake applause noise. I gotta get that.
Yeah.
I gotta work on that.
Yeah, thanks
Steal it from David.
Yeah. Well, that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto on Secular Media Network. Definitely want to thank my co-host, Ari.
Thank you, Callie.
And again, want to thank my guests, Stevie and Jen, for their time and for sharing their stories. You can find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at Gaytheist Callie.
I'm on Facebook at Ari Coleman.
And you can find the show on Twitter at The Gaytheists. If you want to support the work that we do, you can head to patreon.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto and make a per episode donation to support the production of the show and the activism that I do. And if that's not doable, you can go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating to help us get heard by more people. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.